Hello, Alabama. Kirk Herbstreit joined other voices in the sport and made a plea to the playoff committee that could help Bama. Will he be heard? Would this really benefit Bama? We'll see that in the future, but first subscribe to the channel to receive more news from Alabama. The 2024 college football playoff has once again brought to the forefront a discussion essential to the future of college sports: the importance of strength of schedule when it comes to selecting the best teams in the country. And it's impossible not to address this debate without talking about what happened to Alabama this season. The fallout from a decision that left the Crimson Tide out of the CFP is, to say the least, controversial, especially in light of the comments made by Kirk Herbstreit, one of the voices of college football. Herbstreit, after the first round of the 12-team playoffs, had a pointed and pertinent critique: the committee's over-focus on cold win-loss numbers rather than the actual quality of the opponents they faced. He pointed to the lopsided first-round results as proof that teams picked on numbers rather than schedule merit often failed to live up to the hype. And that's where Alabama comes in. With a challenging schedule and performances that clearly showed a level of play above many playoff contenders, Alabama's absence wasn't just unfair, it was a disaster. Kalen DeBoer's team has navigated some tough waters this season, facing some worthy opponents and proving its mettle in high-pressure scenarios. Comparing the Crimson Tide's record to programs that rack up 11 or 12 wins against weaker opponents is, frankly, an affront to competitive football. Herbstreit's comment about merit versus the best sums up the problem. The committee seems to have fallen into the trap of prioritizing the superficiality of statistics, ignoring nuances that make a difference on the field. Wins are important, of course, but beating elite teams does not carry the same weight as crushing average opponents. Alabama is, and always has been, a team that stands out precisely for overcoming challenges. Being left out of the CFP in a scenario where teams with questionable schedules entered only reinforces how wrong this decision was. The disaster of Alabama's exclusion is even more evident when one looks at the performance of the teams in the first round of the playoffs. Herbstreit was right to point out the imbalance: the scores were not competitive, and the games did not have the tension and excitement expected of a CFP. There is no doubt that Alabama, with its history and talent, would have delivered a much more spectacle in line with the expected level. The committee's omission is not only a failure to reward merit, but also a loss for the fans and for the sport itself. In a season marked by ups and downs, Alabama showed resilience and quality, two characteristics that should be valued. The decision to ignore these factors not only calls into question the current system, but also raises questions about the future. Herbstreit was right to ask the committee to rethink its approach to future seasons, with strength of schedule as a determining factor. The goal of a more competitive playoff requires structural changes, and the disaster of leaving Alabama out should be the lesson that leads to that transformation. If there's one thing the Crimson Tide does best, it's represent the best of college football. And the fact that they weren't among the 12 teams chosen shows that the system failed not just Alabama, but the very spirit of competition that makes the sport so special. Let this season serve as a wake-up call: strength of schedule isn't just a detail, it's the essence of what separates the greats from the mediocre. Alabama deserved to be there, and we all know that the outcome could and should have been different. Do you see anything common in this CFP? I want to hear your thoughts at the end. Would that be uncomfortable? Let's see what you think. Let's analyze it. The Alabama Crimson Tide recruiting scene is undergoing a transformation that raises some eyebrows and calls into question one of the pillars of the team's dominance over the past 20 years. Now with DeBoer, the team appears to be moving away from a strategy that defined its identity under Nick Saban, protecting local talent from the state of Alabama and ensuring that they wear the Crimson Tide uniform. The numbers speak for themselves. In the 2025 recruiting class, Alabama signed 21 talented players, earning it the number 2 overall pick, according to 247 Sports. However, only 2 of those players came from the state of Alabama, and neither of them are among the top 10 local players. This fact is, to say the least, surprising and somewhat uncomfortable for a program that has dominated the local scene year after year. It's impossible to ignore the impact of this change. While Alabama's main rival, Auburn, secured 8 of the state's top 10 talents, the Ohio State Buckeyes and Oregon rounded out the list. Cornerback Naeem Offord, Alabama's top-ranked player, chose Oregon over staying home. It creates a troubling contrast. For the first time in years, the Crimson Tide's recruiting identity looks vulnerable. Historically, Alabama's talent acquisition success has been tied to its ability to not only attract the best players in the state, but also to expand its national reach and compete with the SEC and national giants. Nick Saban built a dynasty by transforming the Crimson Tide into a go-to destination for any elite athlete, especially those born in the South, where football is a near-religious passion. DeBoer's new approach, however, seems to indicate a greater reliance on recruiting outside the state's borders. While that can have its advantages, such as expanding the program's national reach, not protecting its home turf gives rivals ammunition. Auburn, in particular, is not missing an opportunity to capitalize on this gap, landing players who historically would have been almost guaranteed to go to Alabama. It's worth noting that this move comes at a time when recruiting is more competitive than ever. NIL and transfer freedom have revolutionized the landscape, making local dominance more challenging. Still, the Crimson Tide is Alabama, and failing to secure any of the state's best players is a tough narrative to justify to fans and the coaching staff. The question is this an anomaly or a trend? If it's just a blip, DeBoer will have to quickly prove that the strategy can yield results on the field. Otherwise, the risk is losing more than just the best local players, it's losing the tradition that made Alabama the gold standard of college football. For a program accustomed to calling the shots in recruiting, relying on outside talent while close rivals dominate the local scene could become a significant problem. Alabama's relationship with its home base cannot be understated, and regaining the dominance will be crucial if the program wants to maintain its position as one of the sport's greats. How do you view that? Some guys are coming and some are going. Hunter Osborne's departure from Alabama marks yet another significant move in the era of college football transfers. The former Crimson Tide defensive lineman, who came to the program as a 4-star prospect in the 2023 class, has decided to take his talents to the ACC, committing to the University of Virginia. Under head coach Tony Elliott, the Cavaliers appear to be building a solid foundation, and Osborne could be an important piece of that restructuring. Osborne's run at Alabama was unfortunately limited in terms of his impact on the field. In 2 seasons, he recorded just 3 tackles, a statistic that doesn't reflect the potential he had coming out of high school. However, the change of scenery could be just what he needs to revive his career and show why he was so coveted as a recruit. Choosing between programs like Vanderbilt and Virginia before settling on the Cavaliers shows that he is looking for a place where he can maximize his playing and development opportunities. For Alabama, this move may seem like a loss, but it's also a reflection of the depth and level of competition within the program. Players like Osborne often struggle to find immediate playing time on a team filled with elite talent, especially on the defensive line. However, this type of situation is common for programs like the Crimson Tide, where only the best of the best can consistently excel. For him, the move to Virginia represents an opportunity for reinvention. The ACC offers a competitive, but perhaps less intense, platform than the SEC, which could allow him to grow at a pace more suited to his needs. Additionally, Tony Elliott's work in transforming the Cavaliers into a growing force in the conference should give Osborne a chance to play a central role on a team on the rise. This move also reflects the modern reality of college football, where transfer freedom and the transfer portal have completely changed the game. Players who don't find a place at elite programs like Alabama now have more options than ever to pursue new opportunities, without the same bureaucratic hurdles of the past. Osborne's departure is a reminder that not all high-profile recruits become instant stars, and that sometimes talent needs a different context to flourish. It will be interesting to watch his development at Virginia and see how he makes the most of the 3 years of eligibility he has left. May this new era be as fruitful for Osborne as the Crimson Tide hopes its next crop of defensive stars will be in continuing the program's legacy. Let's move on. Emmanuel Henderson Jr.'s move from Alabama to Kansas marks an interesting moment in the career of a player who, despite his unquestionable talent, never fully established himself with the Crimson Tide. And that was a different story. For the Jayhawks, this is a significant acquisition, bringing in not only an experienced wide receiver, but also an extremely versatile athlete with an impressive track record dating back to his high school days. Henderson arrived at Alabama as one of the most promising recruits in the 2022 class. Ranked as the number 59 prospect nationally and the second-best running back in his class, he carried high expectations. However, his transition to wide receiver with the Crimson Tide, while full of potential, faced natural challenges, especially in a program as competitive as Alabama's, where roster depth often makes it difficult for talented players to emerge. Still, Henderson found ways to contribute. With a total of 450 special teams snaps over 3 seasons and 146 offensive snaps in 2024 alone, he has proven himself to be a reliable and adaptable player. His stats, while modest 5 career catches for 96 yards, don't fully reflect his ability or the impact he could have in a system that uses him more centrally. For Kansas, Henderson's arrival is a win. Under Lance Leipold, the Jayhawks are blossoming into an emerging force, and adding a player with Henderson's experience could be a game-changer, especially in terms of leadership and offensive versatility. With 1 season of eligibility remaining, he'll have the chance to take on a more prominent role, which could be exactly what he needs to maximize his potential. Henderson isn't just a receiver, he's a complete athlete. Since high school, his scouting report has highlighted his natural ball skills, fluidity on the field and ability to string together moves at the second level. His story is also a reflection of the reality of modern college football. The change in position from running back to wide receiver at Alabama and now the transfer to Kansas demonstrate Henderson's resilience and adaptability in a sport that is constantly evolving. However, what really stands out is the untapped potential he carries. Kansas is betting that, with the right environment, Henderson can finally become the player everyone imagined when he was an elite recruit. If all goes well, this move could be a defining chapter in his career, and proof that sometimes a new opportunity is all a player needs to shine. Meanwhile, Bama has some guys who can really shine, too. Now, I wish the guy the best of luck. What do you think? Comment below.